God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in Him. Question, how do you get satisfied in Him? Well, it's more than thinking, it's drinking. It's more than just talking, it's tasting. The more I taste, the more I drink, the more I experience Him, the more satisfied, I mean in reality, that I really am in Him. I tell you, people don't know what to do with people who are satisfied. They really don't. You know too many satisfied people? We live in a dissatisfied world. You want to stick out, you won't even need a Jesus t-shirt. You just walk around satisfied and people will just do this. Satisfied in Jesus. That's a great song, an old hymn. God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in Him. How do you do that? You drink, you taste, and as you do, it's delicious. It's good. It's good. The more we taste, the more we just get satisfied. In sin, in the flesh, in the world, the power's broken because we're already full. It's hard to eat when you're full. It's hard to eat stuff when you're already full. I want to be so full of Jesus, I don't want to eat that stuff. I don't need that stuff. I'm already full. Yeah. Tonight I want to talk about tasting Jesus as a lover. Just tasting Jesus as a lover. And whenever I talk about this, to say that I feel inadequate is an understatement. I tell you what I feel like. I feel like I've got a Dixie cup. I'm laying right out in the surf of the ocean. You happen to walk up to me and you say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I say, "I'm draining the ocean." Have you come to know that? Is that one of the deepest core truths of your life? That God has a love for me. I've come to know and I have believed the love that God has toward me. After 25 years in the ministry, I've just got to tell you, it's been my experience that in this area we think we know this, but we don't know this very well. I've even come to some real confrontation in my own life in the last year or so. I don't know how well I know this. Does that make you feel secure that you're listening to some deep man? I want to grow more in coming to know and embracing the wow, passionate love that God has for me. I want to taste more of that. I want to experience more of that. Several months ago, I was eating at a Ruby Tuesdays with my wife. I wish you could meet my wife, Lawana. She's the most real woman I know. She really is. I told her, one of my dreams for you is that before I die, I could intimidate you just one time. If that just gives you a little idea of what I'm talking about when I talk to my wife. But she's really honest and she's just really real, and I love that about her. And sometimes it scares me about her, but I love that about her. But we were sitting at a table, just to introduce this tonight, we were sitting at a table, and just that reality and honesty and earthiness was coming out of just where she was coming from. And she was just kind of down on herself, and she was just beating herself up a little bit, and she was talking about how she was failing and this and that and this and that, and she was crying a little bit at the table. And I mean, I sat there, and the thing inside of me that felt like it was just going to explode, and I did end up saying this to her, but it was there before I said it. I said, you know, this is what I'm thinking before I said it. I said, you know, Lawana, I wish it was possible for you to see you through my eyes. Boy, I don't know how you can climb behind my corneas and my lenses to see you. I wish you could feel what I feel towards you. I wish you could think what I think about you. I wish you could see you the way I see you. And I just think your conversation would be different. And I said that to her, and we embraced. And folks, this is a mystical experience, and sometimes it's real and sometimes it's the pizza I had the night before, you know, but boy, folks, I want to tell you right there in that Ruby Tuesdays, the Spirit of God fell on me and He said to me, oh, I just wish for just a fleeting moment you could see you the way I see you, David. Amen. And feel about you the way I feel about you. And think about you the way I think about you. And if you could, it changed the way you feel about you. Yeah. I did this message that I'm doing tonight here 4 or 5 years ago or whenever I was here, but since the cook wants me to do part of it again, I'm going to do part of it again, okay? About, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I traveled in the summers, and I was with 37,000 high school kids who'd grown up in Baptist churches. And I said to these kids, if Jesus Christ, I say this reverently, materialized Star Trek style in our camp, and if He basically came into our camp and He set you down here and He sat here and He did a knee-to-knee, toe-to-toe with you, what would He say to you? What would He feel about you? What would He think about you? 37,000 kids who've grown up in our churches, I asked them this question. And I got 4 categories of responses. The first category I got was this. The kids said, these kids, again, I'm grouping them, but these kids said, oh, I know if I did a knee-to-knee, toe-to-toe with Jesus as His child, I know what He would say to me, and the word that would summarize it would be the word disgusted. These kids were pretty honest. And it would basically go something like this. I'm so disgusted with you. You're hot and cold. You're up and down. You make a commitment. It doesn't last. Boy, I'm so disgusted with you. They said, if I was doing the knee-to-knee, toe-to-toe with Jesus, the word that would summarize that encounter, that experience, would be disgust. A second group, and I could really identify with this group, they said, no, I don't think Jesus would be disgusted with me. I think it would go something like this. I died on the cross for you. It'd be anger. I died on the cross for you, and you can't even stop doing that particular sin. Hey! Their Polaroid picture of God that they carried in their heart was an angry God. Boy, I can identify with that. Man, when I grew up in church where I grew up, my pastor would preach, Jesus is coming, and I think, oh yeah, He's coming. And He's ticked. And He ain't just generally ticked, He's specifically ticked. Well, my Polaroid picture was an angry God. Because I couldn't just stop doing that 1 sin or 10 sins or whatever. The Polaroid picture of God that I carried around in my heart as a kid was an angry God. The third group, this was the biggest group. Let this one grab you. You be honest. You know what I know about you? You know the right answers. But I'm not asking you tonight. This is not a Jesus pop quiz. What I'm asking you for tonight is this. What's the core truth you carry around in your gut? The third group, this was the biggest. I think this one really hit me. They said, hey, if I did a knee-to-knee, toe-to-toe with Jesus, basically the conversation would go like this. You know, Susan, I'm so disappointed with you. I had such high expectations. Man, you just blown it. Man, I'm so disappointed with you. You relate to that? The last group, they basically said, I'm such a spiritual failure. I'm up and down over and yonder, and he'd just be kind of distant. He wouldn't even have eye contact. It'd be just kind of like, okay, come on, I got to get to Czechoslovakia. Come on. Let me ask you a question. Answer this from your gut. If you did a knee-to-knee, toe-to-toe with Jesus, what would go on in His mind as He thought about you? What would erupt primarily from His heart? What would He feel about you? I think there'd be a lot of things, to be honest, that would go on in the chair. But I think whatever else, I would be absolutely stunned. I don't know anything about God, and I don't know anything about the Bible, if at least one of the primary things that you didn't have transposed in the chair, knee-to-knee, toe-to-toe, is that you'd get up and you'd go, I feel incredibly loved. Whatever else that encounter would happen, whatever else would happen in those chairs and those knees and those eyes and those hearts as they connected, what I believe is you'd get up out of that experience stunned with how loved you are. Which brings me to a question that I want to spend the rest of my little time on. Is this: what if you tasted the love of God? If you experienced the manifested, present love of God, if you tasted it, what would it taste like to you? When God loves you in an experiential way, what does that look like? What does that feel like? How do you describe that? When I taste Jesus as my lover, what does that look like? Well, I've asked a lot of people, and I've studied the Word, and I've tried to be honest about my own heart. And I want to share with you what it means to me and what my experience has been. I want to share with you 4 things of what I think tasting Jesus as the lover looks like. And see if you've tasted these things. First of all, I think experiencing Jesus as a lover, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4, means feeling chosen, being chosen. Let me say that a different way. This is huge to me. Experiencing Jesus as a lover means experiencing being wanted. You know, I believe if Jesus walked in this room in the flesh, and to use a Dave Guyon term, if I could hear His sandals flap and I could hear the rod hit the pavement in front of Him, if He walked down the aisle, I believe you'd be drawn into a force field of wantedness. You would feel so wanted by Him. What does it mean to experience and taste the love of God? It means to experience how much He wants you. That's what chosen means. My favorite story, I tell it all the time, but it happened 32 years ago, and I still switch it around in my mouth, and it tastes good. When I was a 12-year-old boy, I was the worst basketball player that God ever created. That's true. Probably somebody in here saying, no, I'm worse than you. Then you'd be wrong. Dead wrong. I'd dribble the ball one time and I could never find it. Where'd that sucker go? I was 12 years old, 7th grader. My brother was a senior in high school, 5 years older than me, an incredible basketball player. One time I saw him sink 105 straight foul shots. Just whoo, 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 whoo. He was a real hero to me growing up. Every Saturday afternoon in my little Nashville neighborhood where we lived, we had a wonderful asphalt court, a beautiful goalpost. Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, 25 big hairy high school guys would descend on our asphalt court, play a little ball. Well, they were older than me, all high school age, and I was a little 12-year-old junior high boy, as a bad basketball player, and I'd look out there, feel intimidated, and I think, no way. With the exception, one Saturday morning I awakened with an attitude. And I had the smirk that goes with that attitude. I remember putting my pants on. I just walked down to the kitchen table. My mother was reading the paper, having a late breakfast. I remember just kind of strutting over to her, and I said, Mom, I'm going to go out. I'm going to play a little ball. with the boys. I don't remember what she said, but it was something like, no, son, I think you need to get a life. I don't remember what it was, but that's what I remember. But I would not be denied. Man, I opened up that door. There they were, 25 big, hairy high school boys. Hair coming out of their shirts, man. I was still waiting for my first hair. You remember when you were 12? But I would not be denied, man. And we lined up. We started shooting foul shots. I remember it was my time. I was the two-hander. I remember praying something like, Lord, I'll be a missionary. Ah! And that ball went, well, then I won't be a missionary. I was done, and I was over there in the recheck pile, and they kept shooting out, and finally got down to two guys that ended up being the captains, one of which was my brother. Then as we did it in our backyard, you shot out so you would get first pick. Seemed like it took 30 minutes for one of those guys to miss. Finally, the other guy missed. My brother was captain with first pick. 32 years ago, 33 years ago now. 23 high school boys, one little 7th grade boy, 2 high school captains, one of which was my brother. 33 years ago, about 11 o'clock in the morning, on a blue sky Saturday, my brother took his big long arm and his long index finger, and the draft started. He went all the way down that long lineup. In wonders of wonders, his finger stopped, and it was pointing at me. And out of his mouth came these unbelievable words in front of his peers. He said, David, I got first pick, and I choose you. I remember as a little old boy, I started walking toward my brother, and I didn't stop by his side and be all dignified. I walked right into his chest, and I remember putting my arms around him, and I remember wetting his T-shirt with my tears that morning. And my brother just threw his arm over me in front of his peers and just continued choosing. Don't miss this. Under his arm, 33 years ago, I tasted something. And you know what I tasted? I tasted being wanted. And you know what happened? It affected me. And I'm talking about it 33 years later. When I taste Jesus as a lover, whatever else that means, it means that he wants me. The question I want to ask you tonight is, how long has it been since you've tasted just being wanted? I think the true thing for a lot of us is we've grown up in environments of rejection. There are people in this building tonight, you weren't wanted by your parents, or you weren't wanted by your friends, you're rejected in your workplace, you're rejected in your neighborhood. Rejection is in your face like crazy. Growing up as a polio boy, cripple was my least favorite word in the English language. I tasted a lot of rejection as a kid because of a handicap. And when I first got a taste of being wanted, folks, I got to tell you, I never got over it. What does it mean to experience the love of Jesus? Number one, it means to experience being wanted. Number two, the piece I want to give you tonight, it not only means tasting being wanted, it means tasted being accepted. Tasted being accepted. Ephesians 1:6, I'm accepted in the beloved. I was speaking in Iowa. I was pretty desperate. I was speaking to about 200 university students, and I'm going to get rebuked by someone who's from Iowa here, I know. But after the talk was over, one of the little Iowa students came up, and he just had the nervous jerks. He was going, man! He said, that was great! And I found myself saying, thank you! And he said to me, he asked me this question. He said, I'm just wondering, could we talk for a few minutes? And I said, well, I got good news and bad news. I said, the bad news is I've already set up an appointment. The good news is my car's parked 300 yards from here, and we can walk and talk on the way. The guy said, I'll go for that. So we're walking and talking, and I just fell in love with this kid because he was so honest. And he was still kind of jerking. He said, David, he said, I've been a Christian for 2 years. I'm a young Christian. And he said, I know that all godly people get up real early in the morning to pray. And he said, I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I fall back to sleep. I mean, he was just condemned. And he said, I know all godly people read the Bible. And I try to read it, but I just don't get much out of it. And finally he got real honest too, and he said, David, I know that real godly people live purely, and I want to, but he said, I'm 20-something years old, and I just lose the battle to lust sometimes. And as I'm walking to the car, I've still probably got 100 yards. In my heart of hearts, I'm saying, God, I really want this guy to get a taste of you. Give me something. Give me something. And the impression that kept coming to me was just this simple impression. He said, ask him about his relationship with his dad, his earthly dad. I looked back at this guy and I said, can I ask you a question that doesn't sound very related? And he said, what's that? I said, tell me about your relationship with your dad, your earthly dad. And the guy, I've never seen a guy's face get so sad so quick, just whoa, his countenance fell. And he said, well, David, he said, my dad is a perfectionist. And then he said, one day, I'm going to do it good enough, right enough, and I'm finally going to get the hug from my dad. And by the time we got to the car, I said to him, I said, I think the way you think your relationship with your dad is, I said, I think that's kind of smudged your lens in the way you think that's the way your heavenly dad responds to you. And it's like your dad's got a stiff arm on you, and he's not way away, but he's certainly not closer than a stiff arm, and he's basically saying, you get this Bible study right, and you get this prayer right, and you witness enough, and you get this love stuff, and then you get my embrace. By that time, we were at the car, and I said to the kid, I said, one of the things that it means to be loved by Jesus is that because of what Christ has done, you're already in God's hug. You're already in God's hug. The hug comes because of Christ's performance and not yours. You get the hug at the beginning. Isn't that good news? You get the hug at the beginning. You remember when Jesus got baptized at the River Jordan and his father said, this is my son in whom I am well pleased. That was right at the beginning of his public ministry. I remember I'd read that early on in my Christian life and I'd think, pleased with what? He hadn't done anything yet. 12 years old, he went to the temple and confused a few scribes, of the head muckety-mucks there. Whoa, where did this kid get this knowledge? But he never taught a Sunday school class, as far as we know. He didn't do a bunch of stuff. And at the beginning of his ministry, he's got his father saying, well done, I'm very pleased. That always used to confuse me. But the good news about a walk with God is you get the hug first. You minister out of already being accepted not minister to, get accepted. Oh, that's huge. I hope you know that. I hope you know that. What does it mean to taste the love of Jesus? It means to experience being wanted. It means to experience being embraced. Thirdly, it means to experience being secure. Hebrews 13:5, for he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever leave you. So that we might confidently say, see, when he says something, I can confidently say it. The Lord is my helper, I'm not going to be afraid. What's your man do to me? Experiencing Jesus as a lover means I'm not going to go away. When I was a pastor a few years ago, I got a phone call from a girl that was a teenager, and she said, I was wondering, could I talk with you for a few minutes? She was crying. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I said, yeah, where are you? And she told me, and I got in my car, and I'm driving toward this girl whose name is Laura, and I put in a mental tape recorder just to remember what I knew about Laura. I'd known her 2 years. And I remember Laura had told me the painful story about how one day her dad called a family meeting, and her mother and her brothers and sisters were there, and the dad came in. He said, I want to have a family meeting with you. It's going to be short. Basically, I just need to tell you, I found another woman that I love. I don't love you anymore, wife. And did some other stuff there. That did not surprise the kids, because the kids knew that their parents' marriage had been in trouble for a while. But Laura said to me, as I've got the mental tape recorder in, she said, the thing that confused me was when my dad got to the threshold of the door, having dismissed the meeting, he turned right at the threshold, he looked right at me, Laura, and said this, I love you, as he abandoned her. I love you as I abandon you. By that time, I'd gotten to the pizza place, and I found her sitting in the corner, in a dark corner, just kind of crying into her pizza. And I sat down and I said, Laura, talk to me. And she said, David, I went to a movie today. And she said, after the movie was over, the curtains came down and the lights came up, and I got up to leave, and for the first time in a year, I looked over and I saw my dad. And she said he was with his lover, but she said what I was not prepared for was his lover had a daughter that was about my age. At least it looked like it. And she said as they turned to leave the theater, it's like I almost had zoom lens on my eyes. It was like I was standing right there, but I was clear across the theater. But she said it was the weirdest experience. She said my dad reached down and grabbed that 14-year-old girl, it seemed to be 14-year-old girl, hand, and their knuckles clasped, and they walked out of the theater together. And then Laura came across that table and across that pizza, and I will never forget this as long as I live. Her hand was trembling, and she was raging. And she said, David, the hand that my father reached for should have been mine. And I said to Laura, I said, you're right. Your dad has sinned against you. But I said, you know what? You just got in touch with something way down in your engine room. You just got in touch with a thirst to be loved with the love that will never, ever let you go. Have you ever had a taste of Jesus like that? I'm not going anywhere. The last thing I want to say to you about experiencing the love of Jesus, I'm not only experiencing being wanted, I'm not only experiencing being embraced, accepted, I'm not only experiencing being secure, I'm not going anywhere. I experience being understood. The last thing I want to just simply say to you is experiencing Jesus as a lover means experiencing someone who really understands. I just jotted down a few things today. He understands the pain of living in a fallen world. Jesus lived here. A man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. He understands being a disappointment. His parents wanted to lock him up. Jesus. They thought he'd lost his mind. His followers were continually disappointed in him. Are you going to be king? You're not. Being a disappointment. You ever feel like you're a disappointment? He knows what that feels like. He understands. He understands being misunderstood. You know, the most misunderstood person who's ever walked this planet is Jesus. He understands being rejected. Whoa. He understands that life's not fair. He understands what it's like to die a cruel death. He understands to ask God, he understands what it's like to ask God why. I've heard a lot of people say, never ought to ask God why. Well, take that up with Jesus. He did. He did. Why have you forsaken me? He understood unanswered prayer. This is what I want, but not my will, but yours. He understands loneliness. They all forsook him and fled. He understands betrayal. Ooh. I got betrayed about 18 months ago. Have you ever been betrayed? Boy, that's painful. He understands that. He understands poverty. After his whole life's over, they're gambling for a robe. I don't know what the prosperity theologists do with that one. He understands verbal abuse. He understands peer pressure. We have a sympathetic high priest. He understands. I want to close with this tonight. I think the first question I want to give you, and then I want to make just a challenge to you. The first statement I want to make to you in form of a question is just simply this. Do you know one of the most important things I think can happen to us on a regular basis is just simply to let Jesus love us? The question I have for you tonight is, do you just need to let him love you? Have you ever had a child that just wouldn't seem to let you love him? Because they're too busy trying to please you. I think it's real important sometimes just to let Jesus love us. To let him just want us, and to let him just embrace us. Just to let him be there. To let him understand. Maybe you just need to let him love you tonight. Just let him. So I guess the question I want to leave you with, and the challenge I want to leave you with, when someone comes into our presence, do they feel wanted? Do they feel embraced? Do they feel that we're not going to go away? Do they feel that we understand? Maybe the reason a lot of people don't taste Jesus, maybe it's not because they're lacking some big mystical experience And I'm for those. I'm for every one of those He wants to give me. But maybe for a lot of people, the reason they don't taste Jesus often is that we just need to let Him flow out of us a little better. I was in my men's group one day, and I got a group of men that we meet, and it's such an honest group, it's almost scary. And I'll never forget what a guy said to us one day. This doesn't sound real powerful when I say it, but I'll never forget it my whole life. He looked at the four of us as men, besides himself, 5. And he said, I just wonder, would you guys hold me for a while? Just wondering if you'd hold me for a while. I tell you, I sat there holding my brother. Just holding him. And I smelled the sweet aroma of Jesus. And you know, when He left our embrace as the body of Christ, I think He said, you know what? That was good. Maybe some of you need to be held tonight. Just listen to your heart. Lord Jesus, in these moments, we just wait before You, and I believe tonight You want to say to some of us in a deeper way, like I wanted to say to my wife in that restaurant that night, I just wish for once You could see Yourself through my eyes. I wish You could crawl behind my eyeballs and look at You, because what You would see would be so different. I wish You could think what I think about You. I wish You could feel what I feel about You. And what I feel for my wife, Lord, which is huge, it's got to be microscopic for what You feel about us. I pray in ways I don't even know how to explain that You'd let that truth go deeper into the core of our being tonight. That we're not only forgiven, but we really are loved. The Father killed His Son because He wanted us. There might be some folks who've never entered into a relationship with Jesus. And I pray You draw them to begin that relationship with Christ. They'd find somebody and say, hey, I'm not a Christian. Help me to become part of God's family tonight. Holy Spirit, just come and give us whatever You want to give us. Might we taste and see that You're good.